wanted to be a pilot since I was 4 years old. Whenever I'd play outside, I'd see the airplanes flying over the house. I would point to the sky and say that's what I want to do when I grow up. Football provided the opportunity for me to chase my dream of becoming a pilot. I got recruited to play quarterback at the Air Force Academy, and I had a pretty good career. Tim Jefferson! As an Air Force veteran and former football player, one of my favorite traditions is the pregame flyover.
That's what I'm talking about!
You hear the loud roar of the jet engines, and it really sets the tone.
I love it, baby! I love it!
As the national anthem plays and the Thunderbirds take flight over the Super Bowl in Las Vegas, I want to explore the hidden history in those skies. One that started with the Tuskegee Airmen, the flyest ever. I went down to Tuskegee, Alabama, and touched ground at Moton Field, the sacred soil where the Tuskegee Airmen trained and the legend began.
Yeah, I mean, this is hallowed ground, you know? As a boy growing up who always wanted to be a pilot, not really knowing the means of how to get there, thinking about the military route and seeing the history that took place here. It only makes me wonder, like, the type of stuff that those guys went through, you know, just knowing that this is where Black pilots in the military got their first opportunity. And to me, that's sacred.
My guide is Colonel Palmer Sullins. He was born and raised here. He played football for Tuskegee University, and his mentor was Chief Anderson, an airman who taught him how to fly. Colonel Sullins is proud to share that legacy.
Colonel Sullins.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you?
Nice to meet you.
Glad to meet you also.
Yeah.
Welcome to the hallowed grounds of Tuskegee Airmen.
So happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'll tell you what, within the Tuskegee Airmen legacy, you know, there's over 15,000 men and women that participated in their successes through their training, deployment, and everything. And so much of it's represented here at Moton Field. I get really emotional with this here, you know, because of my experiences with it and the number of airmen that I had a chance to meet along the way. Of course, I grew up here in Tuskegee and just came out here as a young kid flying with Chief Anderson, who was father of Black aviation and was the chief primary instructor for the airmen, along with a number of other civilian instructors whom I got to meet.
President of Tuskegee University, Dr. Robert Moton, once said, "When white folk die, they want to go to heaven. When colored folk die, they want to go to Tuskegee." At the dawn of the 20th century, Tuskegee was a beacon of light in the darkness of the segregated South. Much of that success is credited to one man, who remains a towering figure.
This is Booker T. Washington lifting the veil of ignorance. It represents a Black man who is looking to learn, looking for an opportunity.
He lifted the veil of ignorance from his people and pointed the ways to progress through education and industry.
Absolutely.
Booker T. Washington is known as being one of the most influential and famous African Americans during his time. What were some of the things that he was able to provide for the African American community?
This is Mother Tuskegee. This is the university school that he founded.
Booker T. Washington was born a slave. Fortunately, after the Emancipation Proclamation, he was freed. He was very interested in getting an education. So he enrolled at Hampton Institute. It wasn't Hampton Institute in those days. It was called Hampton Normal School. Normal, meaning that slaves, former slaves, were given an education so that they could become teachers.
He was summoned to come to Tuskegee by Lewis Adams, and Booker T. Washington relocated to Tuskegee and started Tuskegee Normal, was what it was called back then. The main thing that he wanted to do was make sure that that black people had an opportunity.
He is very significant in the life of African Americans because he taught a number of former slaves how to read and write. They learned skills that were needed to earn a livelihood.
We were an agrarian kind of society at the time, so it was very focused on agricultural and mechanics and the industrial side of things. Very, very important, not only to the black society, but to the nation as well.
So there was a thing called the Tuskegee experiment. Can you talk about that?
The Tuskegee experiment was the term that was derived from the theory that the black man was inferior and would not stand up in war.
In 1925, the Army War College published a memo that was used to subjugate black men to menial tasks. This official document, based on racist opinions and stereotypes, kept the military segregated. It stopped black soldiers from participating in meaningful wartime roles.
Read that one.
Section 5, the combat characteristics of the Negro. Bullet 2, an opinion held in common by practically all officers is that the Negro is a rank coward in the dark. He cannot control himself in the fear of danger to the extent the white man can. He has not the initiative and resourcefulness of the white man. He is mentally inferior to the white man.
The experiment.
63 pages of garbage. We couldn't do anything, according to them. We couldn't fly aircraft. We couldn't operate heavy machinery. We were inferior to the white man.
We were too illiterate. We were too immoral. We were cowards. And in combat, you don't want a coward at the front.
When I see a study like this, it helps me to understand what we have been up against since slavery, since before slavery, right? It helps me to understand just how deep the misconception and the thoughts are against the possibilities of what Black America can do. And they didn't want us to have the opportunities to rise up and to be a part of anything.
During his re-election campaign in 1939, President Franklin D. Roosevelt approved legislation that laid a foundation for black pilots to get their wings. This opened the doors for an experiment that would give African Americans an opportunity to join the Army Air Corps.
In 1939, there was a public law that allowed for the establishment of training for non-military and military pilots. So as a result of that, Tuskegee Institute was one of those colleges that had a civilian pilot training program, which meant blacks were already flying with civilian pilot licenses. But at Tuskegee itself, because there were 7 other colleges that were training blacks, they chose the South to train them in.
The Tuskegee Airmen were recruited from across the country. They came from the West Coast, they came from the Midwest, they came from the Northeast, and they came from the South, but they all congregated at Tuskegee in Molten Field, Alabama, and that was a place where discrimination was rampant.
It was Alabama in the South.
Jim Crow laws were still in effect. There were a lot of black men being lynched.
Welcome to the South. That was my introduction to the South, and then from there, everything was downhill. During my young life, all through school, I did not experience any racism at all. Never called the N-word, nothing. And I used to fit right in with everyone else. So this was a shock to me, but it was the law of the land.
The surrounding area of Tuskegee, we learned quickly to avoid that. We could go from the base to the university, which was about 10 miles away. And everything was all right there. But between the base and Tuskegee University, it was not a place to be.
I never went into town, stayed on the post. I felt in my heart that was the safest place for me, was on the base, so that's where I stayed the whole training. I was there to learn to fly, and that was my mission. Well, in primary, our instructors were of color, and they were graduates of the Tuskegee Institute Flying School. Their mission was twofold. One was to teach us to fly, and the next was to condition us for the white instructors we would be flying with in basic and advanced. So they would call us all kinds of names to provoke us to do something, but we didn't do that. We kept our cool. That's what they were there to do, teach us how to keep our cool. They did a good job.
Even with the civilian pilot training program, the country was still stained with racism. Although there were some allies like Noel Parrish, many in the upper ranks didn't want black pilots in the Army Air Corps.
They called him Hap Arnold, H-A-P. That was a nickname. His last name was Arnold. And he felt that it would take 10 years to train a black man how to be a pilot.
I tried to enlist in the Army Air Corps in January of 43, and they said they weren't taking enlistments at that time. Well, that was the height of the war. What they were saying is they didn't want me, because General Hap Arnold did not want any Negroes in his Army Air Corps.
They were really not willing to be the first in saying, we're gonna just go ahead and do away with the segregation. So it was harder for whites and blacks interacting.
With opposition from the top brass in the media, progress on the Tuskegee experiment was halted until they got an unexpected boost from the First Lady, Eleanor Roosevelt.
Eleanor Roosevelt came to Tuskegee actually in support of the Roosevelt Foundation. At the same time, she was very much aware of what was going on with the war and also with the efforts in trying to get black people involved with the war, especially those in aviation. She came by Tuskegee University to visit, and they escorted her from the university out to Kennedy Field, where Chief was training in the civilian pilot program, and she was introduced to him. And Chief told me that she walked up to him and said, well, I understand that colored people can't fly. And so Chief told me, he said, well, we're flying around here, we're not having any problems. And she said, well, I'll just take a ride with you. And Chief told me that the Secret Service just went ballistic. Said, oh, you know, you can't go, you can't go. From what I've heard about Eleanor Roosevelt, she was a lady of her own pace, and she said, I'm going with him. So one of the famous pictures that you see out there today is a picture of Chief Anderson with Eleanor Roosevelt in the back of his airplane. And they flew around Tuskegee for about 45 minutes and then went back to Kennedy Field. And the rest is history.
In July of 1941, 5 young Negroes made aviation history at Tuskegee, Alabama. These 5 men were the first of their race to graduate under the Army Air Force's newly organized plan for training Negro pilots. These men are representatives of 30 million fellow Negroes, and all 30 million have their eyes and hopes pinned on them. They flew hard, studied hard, and busted buttons bulging their chests at inspection. And they made the grade. They are inspired by their leader, Captain Benjamin O. Davis, the first Negro ever to be accorded the traditional recognition by West Point upperclassmen.
General Davis was a very unique individual. He was the first black person to go to the military academy, West Point. He was highly ridiculed and pushed to the side.
He was isolated. The only time they really would talk to him was when it was mandatory. Not anybody just talking to him because they wanted to be an acquaintance.
For like 4 years, they like, don't talk to that guy. You know, don't talk to him, leave him alone. He, to me, like I say that now, but when I was first reading, I was like, oh yeah, that guy should have just left because they didn't want him.
He didn't use that as a deterrent to not make it to graduation. Instead, he focused on that to be a motivating factor. And it's almost like he became a man who preserved his words so that when he did speak, he was speaking accurately and his words commanded the respect of his peers, which put him in a position to graduate in the top of his class.
Davis graduated like number 35 in his class. You know, out of hundreds of people that were graduating. And so again, that tells you the extraordinary individual that he was, the type of focus that he had for achieving what he wanted to achieve.
Benjamin O. Davis Jr. would go on to become the group commander of the 99th and the 332nd. Forged by fire, he was guided by a purpose much greater than himself.
When I saw the things they went through and they still kept going, you learn that like, things don't happen for you the first time. And if you really want it, you gotta work hard for it. No other way to like be, right? If you know that there's a bigger goal for something, you're gonna have to go through the deepest valleys.
December 7th, 1941. In the wake of the attack on Pearl Harbor, the U.S. was thrust into World War II. After facing a critical manpower shortage, the Tuskegee Airmen got the call. All hands on deck.
First Tuskegee Airmen to earn their wings would be in March of '42, and that was the 5 men that included B.O. Davis. They went overseas the 99th in March of '43. That spring of '43 is when they would go into combat for the first time ever. And that is why this whole legacy of the Red Tails has become so famous, because the first to fly in World War II would be the 99th as a black flying unit.
When the black units were sent to combat, the missions they were given were ash and trash, as we call it. They were not as significant as the missions that were given to white units.
General William Momeyer used battle statistics from these dummy missions to downplay the contributions of the airmen. General Davis traveled back to the Pentagon and responded with a statement of his own. "Give us a real chance to show what we can do."
It was obvious that Davis, number one, knew the capability of his pilots, and he knew what they had been doing in the theater and the kind of capabilities that they brought to the front lines of the war. And so for General Momeyer to make this statement that they weren't capable of doing this was just absolutely wrong. It was a lie.
In 1944, the 332nd moved to Italy's Ramitelli airfield, where they would fly brand new P-51 Mustangs and paint the tails of those planes their trademark red. Under General Davis's command, they were now closer to the action.
Davis gave direct instructions to them that this is what you will do. You will protect the bombers. Most fighter pilots that are out there, myself included, if you're in enemy territory and enemy airplanes come around, everybody wants to shoot down an enemy airplane, But that wasn't the mission. The mission was to escort and protect the bombers.
On March 24th, 1945, the 332nd was summoned to escort bombers from the 15th Air Force on a run to Berlin. But when they arrived at the rendezvous point, the other fighter squadrons were nowhere to be found. Despite being low on fuel, the Red Tails stayed with the bombers the length of the trip. They destroyed 3 German jet fighters and damaged 5 more. Mission accomplished.
In March of 1945, the longest mission they escorted to Berlin proved their competency. Even B.O. Davis put on his plane, he had it written by request, because the bombers started realizing these guys, when they show up, they don't leave us.
Their courage to stand up and just show what they were capable of doing. The record, I believe they had the lowest loss record for fighters escorting bombers in World War II. They proved it, and so from there, they were paving the way.
It wasn't just about the tactical success of the Tuskegee Airmen. It wasn't just about the combat victories that they amassed, and they had plenty of them as they escorted those bombers. But he knew that what they called the Tuskegee experiment at that time, how important it was from a strategic standpoint, and that if they failed, that it would possibly take our country in a different direction.
A summary of the combat record of the Tuskegee Airmen. They destroyed 111 aircraft in aerial combat, damaged 25. On the ground, they destroyed 150 aircraft, barges and boats. They destroyed a total of 40. Boxcars, a total of 619. Destroyers, can you imagine that? They sank a destroyer, only one. Total missions that they flew, 1,578. It was a sterling record. As a matter of fact, I met a man who said that his father told him that the reason he made it back to the United States was because the Tuskegee Airmen escorted his bomber and prevented his bomber from being blasted out of the sky. So he felt that those men made it possible for him to return home safely.
They ended up with some respect overseas compared to even here at home, because when the airmen returned to America, they ended up coming in home on ships to a segregated America. So they returned home not as heroes, even though they might have been treated as heroes by some of the allies overseas.
You get on a bus down there and you see prisoners of war, German prisoners of war. If the bus was full and these prisoners were no seats, we would be asked to get up and move to let these prisoners sit down.
They said, no, we're not going to take this. We're dying for this country. We refuse to accept a segregated system at home, too.
Back in America, there was no ticker tape parade for black soldiers. They had won the war overseas, only to return home to a war on the home front.
The double V. V, which meant victory against Nazism in Europe and victory at home against racial discrimination.
They had to win both of those in order to serve. And if they were going to be able to win that victory abroad, they had to win the victory over discrimination at home.
They showed, if providing an opportunity, they had the potential to succeed. And that's exactly what they did. And eventually got to a point of 14,600 Tuskegee Airmen, which included pilots, maintainers, logisticians, nurses, over 900 pilots, over 300 one of them went to combat. And so a great heritage, but a really pushed to help integrate the armed services in 1948.
As the commander of Pacific Air Forces, a senior leader in our Air Force, and an African American, many of you may be wondering what I'm thinking about the current events surrounding the tragic death of George Floyd. I'm thinking about how full I am with emotion, not just for George Floyd, but the many African Americans that have suffered the same fate as George Floyd. And thinking about a history of racial issues and my own experiences that didn't always sing of liberty and equality. I'm thinking about my Air Force career, where I was often the only African American in my squadron or as a senior officer, the only African American in the room. I'm thinking about the pressure I felt to perform error-free, especially for supervisors I perceived had expected less from me as an African American. I think about having to represent by working twice as hard to prove their expectations and perceptions of African Americans were invalid. I'm thinking about the airmen who don't have a life similar to mine and don't have to navigate through two worlds. I'm thinking about how these airmen view racism, whether they don't see it as a problem since it doesn't happen to them, or whether they're empathetic. I'm thinking about our two sons. Now we had to prepare them to live in two worlds. Finally, I'm thinking about my historic nomination to be the first African American to serve as the Air Force Chief of Staff. I'm thinking about the African Americans that went before me to make this opportunity possible. I'm thinking about the immense expectations that come with this historic nomination, particularly through the lens of current events plaguing our nation. I'm thinking about how I may have fallen short in my career and will likely continue falling short living up to all those expectations. I'm thinking about how my nomination provides some hope, but also comes with a heavy burden. That's what I'm thinking about. I want to know what you're thinking about. I want to hear what you're thinking about and how together we can make a difference.
What prompted you to put out that message, and why did you feel that that was the time to deliver that message?
Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, just personally, it really bothered me. And during that time frame, I had actually had gone through my confirmation hearing to be the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, but it was not yet confirmed. Our son called us on a Sunday. He was struggling. And in the conversation, he asked me, "Dad, what is Pacific Air Force going to do?" What he's really asking me is, "Dad, what are you going to do?" Right? And that tore on me. Partly because we couldn't be with him. And so when I came back to work on Monday, my staff told me, "Hey, you're probably going to get confirmed on Tuesday." And I really wanted to say something. And so I recorded the video, and my intent for the video was to really talk to the Airmen of Pacific Air Forces, not for it to go as broad as it did, but I'm glad it did. And I also felt in my heart of hearts that I needed to say that what was right, and if it was going to jeopardize my confirmation, so be it. It made me feel like I was at least contributing to the conversation in the aspect of highlighting how I grew up in the challenges that I had, but others have. But it really also gave a voice. The fact that we have to have conversations about some of these difficult topics. But the key point of this is to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to reach their full potential. And that was pretty much what I wanted to be able to get across, that it all impacts us, and we can't fix it all in one fell swoop, but we also got to continue to progress. You think about the Tuskegee Airmen, you think about the Civil Rights Movement, you think about all these other rights movements across our nation. We got to keep pressing forward to provide those opportunities.
Leadership means having the courage to stand up and speak truth to power. Black pilots sparked change in the armed forces and remained at the forefront of the civil rights movement, pushing for integration and civil liberties.
At Freeman Field, there was what is called a mutiny, when some black officers were denied the use of the White Officers Club.
There was a White Officers Club, and then there was another place, I'm not so sure you would call it an officers club, that where black aviators went. And Roger Terry and several others decided on this day, we're going in that officers club, which was the White Officers Club.
An organized protest at Freeman Field led to the arrest of more than 100 black officers. They were pressured to sign a letter stating they were to use a segregated officers club. When they refused to sign, they were kicked off the base and put on house arrest.
Roger Terry got convicted, and that stayed with him up until the 90s when Rodney Coleman, as one of the assistant secretaries of the Air Force at the time, got that taken off of his records.
The record that they established and the attitudes that they changed manifested through the civil rights movement, but they were the ones that really laid out that example to show that the practices that we had in our country were wrong. that we needed to change them and that we needed to really embrace the talent of our country, regardless of their race.
But you also saw that after the fact in subsequent service, not just in the Air Force, but really all of our military branches as they continue to serve in Korea, Vietnam, and the opportunities that it's really opened up for me personally.
I have the honor of introducing my nominee to be the next chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Charles Q. Brown, Jr. General, welcome.
General Charles Q. Brown is inspiring multiple airmen of different races, religions, creeds who all serve, and they're able to see him and see that and not only be inspired by him, but hopefully, and I would imagine because a big thing in the military is mentorship, is inspire and pick out future CQ Browns to help them in their careers.
I'm very happy for General CQ Brown in his position as chairman of the Joint Chiefs. That means a lot, considering what they thought of us back in the 40s. To see that where we've come, and every step along the way, we proved that we were good. We were worthy of whatever we were given, and whatever assignment we were given.
I first met CQ Brown when he was a captain as an aide-de-camp to the Chief of Staff in the Air Force in 1995. And to see him move from there and do all of the things that he has done and the leadership roles that he's had, extraordinary individual.
There's no question in my mind that he looks at the Tuskegee Airmen also as the front runners that allowed him to get where he is. And I know that when they look at him, some of the Tuskegee Airmen who are still with us, they know that they had a role in him being where he is today, a role in me being where I am today, and a role in changing our country for who we are now and how we're progressing.
After visiting Tuskegee and learning about the legacy of the airmen who graced Moulton Field, I had to meet one in real life. I went to Colorado to meet with a 100-year-old, highly decorated red tail.
I finished my combat training at Walterboro, South Carolina. I had my bags packed with 1 hour catching the train to go to Norfolk, and we got a message saying to hold us. The war in Italy was over, and they expected to wind up the whole European theater. But the truth is, Hitler knew I was coming, so he threw in the towel the following month. Take 20. That's me right there.
Right in the middle.
Right in the middle, yeah. In January of '49, the Chief of Staff of the Air Force sent a directive out to all the fighter groups in the United States, stating that they were to have weapons training between each group and between each pilot, and they were to select 3 pilots to represent their fighter group at the first ever Top Gun weapons meet to be held in May of 1949 at Nellis Air Force Base. Captain Temple of the 301st, First Lieutenant Harry Stewart of the 300th, myself of the 99th were chosen as primary members, so that was our team. Now, our maintenance officer, Captain Wiley, he was a red tail. He was also the liaison between the Rules Committee and our group. And he had meetings to go to. And every meeting he went to with the Rules Committee, they ignored him. They didn't want to hear anything he had to say. We asked him how his meetings went, and he told us, and that ticked us off. The only thing left for us to do was go out and win this meet. Our competitors were flying P-51s and F-82s, and we were flying the obsolete P-47. The missions that we had to fly were aerial gunning, dive bombing, skip bombing, rocket firing, and panel strafing. Now, they're going to award 2 trophies, one for high team and one for high individual. We're leading in this weapons meet. The last mission, we have panel strafing, and Captain Temple, he's still leading his high individual. They aced Captain Temple out of first place in panel strafing. I won't say how they did it. I have my thoughts, but I'm not saying. Anyway, Captain Temple did not win high individual. However, we won the meet. That was in May of 1949. And the record books listed the winner of the 1949 weapons meet as unknown. They knew who won, that's why they listed as unknown. As of April of '95, the 332nd is listed as the winner of the 1949 weapons meet. 46 years later. However, we did not have any recognition at Nellis Air Force Base at all. And that's where they had all these meets. As of January the 21st of 2022, the 332nd is listed as the winner of the 1949 weapons meet, almost 73 years later. But we have it now, thanks to General Kelly.
What was your motivating factor to keep pushing and keep putting up with
Me
everything?
personally, I was a perfectionist, and I personally wanted to be the best. So I didn't settle for anything less. Everything we entered in against them, we won.
And they can't take that away from you.
Nope, they sure can't.
Colonel Harvey and his fellow pioneers paved the way for new groundbreakers like Lieutenant Colonel Shauna Rochelle Kimbrell, the first black female fighter pilot. Pain to progress, from one generation to another.
The trailblazers ahead of me, the Tuskegee Airmen, I was thankful that they had softened the ground, but it was definitely not a beaten path that we were on. I was able to achieve my dream and my goal because I was very focused. I had a level of tenacity to break outside of the shackles of our own minds and go for my dream. The laws were against women flying fighters until 10 years after I decided that that's what I wanted to do. So I was often told that I wasn't going to be allowed to do that. And as a young person, my answer to that was always, well, I'm young and it'll either change or I'm going to change it because this is what I'm going to do with my life.
General Richard Clark was the first black commandant when I was at the Air Force Academy. And now he's the Academy's first black superintendent.
I think it's probably less of a surprise to people now that we would have a black chairman or a black superintendent or a black chief of staff of the Air Force. What I would say that it's a credit to our military that we do. It's a credit that they would pick people based on the content of their character, not the color of their skin or their gender or their ethnicity. It's just about who they are. Now, we still have work to do. There's no question in my mind that we're not perfect. We are not perfect, but we're making good progress. And I think General Brown is an example of that progress. I am certainly, and there's so many other leaders out there that represent the progress that we've made since the time that the Tuskegee Airmen had to fight to serve. Now we're being asked to serve. And it's an honor and a privilege to be able to do it.
Today, I'll have the distinct honor of promoting James Harvey from Lieutenant Colonel to Colonel. The Tuskegee Airmen are my heroes, and knowing that he's one of the few that are still alive to be here today is extremely special for me personally.
It is my distinct honor that we are here to recognize a member of our greatest generation. If you go back to World War II, African Americans weren't allowed to participate in technical career fields. And based on a wartime need and a push by the African American press, there was an experiment. That experiment was the Tuskegee Airmen. Lieutenant Colonel Harvey, you helped ensure that experiment was a success. Because of Lieutenant Colonel Harvey's efforts and those of the Tuskegee Airmen and many others, in 1948, President Truman integrated the services. In 1949, James Harvey was a member of the weapons meet team from the Tuskegee Airmen that won. In 1950, James Harvey was the first African-American pilot to fly in the Korean conflict. He had over 126 combat missions defending our forces on the ground and continued to serve in the United States Air Force for 22 years. Because of his work breaking barriers, I can stand here today as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. James, we want to thank you for your service. We want to thank you for breaking barriers. And it's my distinct honor that we're going to promote you to Colonel today. Please publish the order.
Attention to orders. In consideration of a lifetime of commitment to this nation, from flying combat sorties over the Pacific in World War II to providing close air support to U.S. Army infantry in Korea, and because of our trust and confidence in the patriotism, integrity, and abilities of Lieutenant Colonel James H. Harvey III, he is hereby promoted to the honorary rank of Colonel, United States Air Force, signed 1 September 2023 by order of the Secretary of the Air Force, done on this day, 4 November 2023.
General Richard Clark was the first black commandant when I was at the Air Force Academy. And now he's the Academy's first black superintendent.
You and I, we're both black aviators, and coming from the Air Force Academy, you know, that's a great honor to be able to go off to pilot training and earn your wings. You're one of the most revered persons here at the United States Air Force Academy. You know, think about, you graduated in '86, you're a standout football player.
And it's intercepted. Richard Clark making his way down the field. Dick Clark is a madman possessed.
You went off to become a B-1 pilot, came back to become the commandant of cadets, and then now you're the superintendent at the United States Air Force Academy.
You and I took such a similar path, you know, extraordinary football player here when you know, back in the day when we were both here, when I was your commandant, and just what you and your team did was extraordinary. And then, interestingly, you went on to fly the B-1.
Exactly.
Pretty cool. We got to fly the same plane after you were an instructor, but so you know a lot about the path that I went on.
I can tell you that from my time frame, being stationed up in Rapid City, South Dakota at Ellsworth Air Force Base, I was the only minority in my squadron.
I was the squadron commander, the leader of the squadron, and I was the only minority in the squadron. The aviation career fields aren't usually the most diverse career fields in the Air Force, but I think it's important that we continue to move it forward, but I think both of us had similar experiences. It's been steady change, but maybe not as fast as we'd like it, but I think it'll help our country, it'll help our military as we build upon the diversity and that strength in America.
Aviators make up 2% of the Air Force. African-American aviators make up approximately 2% of that 2%. And in order to grow those numbers, we have to do things like talking about the Tuskegee Airmen and honoring their legacy so that young individuals can see themselves and not just see one version of themselves, but see people from neighborhoods similar to theirs, see people who are mathematicians or people who are English majors, and then have those same passions to recognize that the color of my skin does not define if I'm able or capable of being an aviator or not.
Working at the academy that I did for a little while and working with some of the football players, I always encourage those young men to, if they have any inkling of going to fly jets, they're the type of people that we're looking for because they have drive, they have focus, they are willing to go out and do the hard thing for football, which means they're willing to go out and do the hard thing for life. And it is such a beautiful thing to watch those high-level athletes move into something like becoming a fighter pilot. They are able to multitask. They are able to debrief and not take it as a hurt to the soul when you are told, this is not how you do that. This is what you need to fix, and this is how you go out and do it again, and they do the reps. And they go out there and they do the reps over and over, just like we do when we fly fighters.
P.J. Ramsey didn't buy the fake, and he wrapped up Legal, and he drops him for a 7-yard loss.
ever since I was little, being introduced to like the red tails and everything like that, seeing planes, I just always been kind of fascinated with air and how planes are able to work and all those things. When I got offered by the Air Force Academy going into my senior year of high school, it was just like a dream come true. Most of my family's in the military, so I was able to follow, in the footsteps of my uncle, my grandparents, and my dad. I was able to get RPAs for my job, which is piloting the drones. So once I graduate, I think I'm gonna go down to San Antonio and be able to do my training. Most of the black students here who aren't athletes, they do want to be pilots. But most of the black students out here that are athletes, they just don't really have the opportunity for the most part. I kind of got lucky just being close to Tuskegee, and then the time period that was happening with the movie and different, people talking about them making an emphasis for us to know about Tuskegee Airmen and what they did. I feel like the majority of them don't really learn that much about being a pilot till they get here. And by that time, a lot of people here already have flight hours, already kind of know what they want to do, and we're all kind of behind the 8 ball on it. A lot of times, being a young black male, you don't have a lot of people who look like you in high up places. But when I first came here, I see General Brown, he's over the Air Force. I see General Clark, he's our, superintendent, the first black superintendent. It was really just crazy. I never really had anybody that high up that kind of looked like me. So it kind of just shows there's like upward mobility. There's a chance for me to be able to do something really great here.
During World War II, many college football standouts joined the war. Stars like Wilmeth Sidat Singh, John Mosley, and Gene Derricott took their talents from the football field to Moton Field. One came straight from Tuskegee University's football team.
One of my heroes is General Chappie James, and he was a 4-star general, the first 4-star general in the Air Force. He was the commander of NORTHCOM NORAD, which is one of the most significant military commands that we have and that we had at his time. But he was also a football player at Tuskegee University.
I was told that actually, because of his height and his size, that when he got in the fighter aircraft, they had to kind of push him down to get the canopy over him.
Though he didn't fly in World War II, he flew in every subsequent war, was a combat veteran, a hero, and achieved the greatest rank that we have, that we could give to a person, and led at the most distinct levels of our military. So certainly a distinguished leader, but if he's anything like me and so many of our athletes, I am certain that a lot of his leadership skills came on the fields of friendly strife, on the athletic fields, in his case, football.
To me, one of the greatest wonders of the world is the Air Force Thunderbirds demonstration team. Seeing their excellence and precision has always made my jaw drop.
The Thunderbirds were made to serve as a beacon of hope, to unite people in divided times. So they were formed in 1953. They were painted red, white, and blue to be America's team.
The Thunderbirds are a demonstration team. They're iconic. And actually, Benjamin O. Davis, who was the leader of the Tuskegee Airmen, had a role in bringing the Thunderbirds on.
He was a staff officer in the Pentagon. And when we are trying to make decisions on programs such as the Thunderbirds, it's staffed all the way up through the staff, all the way then to the Chief of Staff of the Air Force. General Davis was one of those staff officers that helped to staff what we call the package when it was approved.
The Thunderbirds is what brings notoriety or brings attention to the Air Force. So to think that Benjamin O. Davis Jr., who had not only flown in combat, but also had the vision to be able to recruit something that will keep building our military. And yet and still, he was forgotten for his role. And certainly, I found a document that he turned in 1953, talking about his role in founding the Thunderbirds.
Black aviators today, Davis had an impact on all of us. That's the legacy and the beauty of the whole thing. Davis, as well as all of the other Tuskegee Airmen, I mean, we stand on their shoulders. Let there be no question about that.
General Lloyd Fig Newton, he was the first African-American Thunderbird pilot. I believe it was October 1974 that he joined the team. Served for about 3.5 years on the team. That's kind of his legacy to the team, but more so than that, he went on to be 4-star general. Actually just met with him 2 weeks ago during our change of command here for our new boss, new Thunderbird 1 commander leader. He just gave us his tips, advice, and was there just to kind of be a support network for the Thunderbird team to just continue our legacy and continue to build our brand that he helped establish himself back then.
So they're the foundation. I stand on the shoulders of giants. So there's obviously the Tuskegee Airmen, that generation in the 40s, but then there's the next generation of the Fig Newtons. And then today there's the CQ Browns. And I just am very thankful for them to persevere and to push through and set the standard and really open the door for somebody like me to live up to my full potential.
At Nellis Air Force Base, I had the opportunity to take a ride with Thunderbird 7, Lieutenant Colonel Taylor Flash White, one of the black pilots who will be flying over Super Bowl 58 in Las Vegas. He took me through all of the maneuvers that the Thunderbirds perform in their demonstrations, from top to bottom. We pulled 9Gs, and he even let me grab the controls and do my thing.
My friend, this is the official 9G flag. Float this in a jet, so you can take that as a little memorabilia.
All right. Best Air Force flight I've ever flown in my life, and I really appreciate that. Your professionalism, your skill, everything about this flight was great, and that's, has to go to you. So thank you so much. Thank you everybody for this amazing moment.
As the Thunderbirds fly over Allegiant Stadium for Super Bowl 58, they carry with them the legend of the Tuskegee Airmen, the men and women who overcame discrimination, made the experiment a success, and secured a double victory. From the heart of Alabama to the plains of Italy and beyond, they fought courageously for freedom and end segregation, paving the way for the next generation to rise even higher. Their legacy is etched in the sky, and the history of black aviators will not be forgotten nor denied. I had an opportunity to meet with Colonel James Harvey, who is a Tuskegee Airman. He's 100 years old. He gave me this jacket. It has all the Tuskegee Airmen units on the back. And then on the inside, it has the names of all 900 plus Tuskegee Airmen pilots who went through training down at Moulton Field and became Tuskegee Red Tails. And so I want to pass this jacket on to you. What do you think about that jacket? How does it make you feel?
I like to think about all they had to go through so, we can have opportunities that we have today. Without them, without the sacrifice they're willing to do, we wouldn't be here, having this opportunity.
Well, that's awesome. I appreciate you, PJ. Thank you so much, and continue that legacy.
Yes, sir. Thank you.